I still remember the moment I realised something was wrong. It was that strange kind of silence that doesn't belong in the woods. I was camped off a little-used fire road in the Allegheny Backcountry, my first solo weekend away from the hum of town. I'd just finished boiling water for coffee when I heard it, a faint, uneven call echoing through the trees. At first, I thought it was a bird. Then it came again, broken, weak. "Help!" I froze. The voice was close enough to be real, but far enough to sound like it came from another world. I grabbed my first aid kit and flashlight, though it was midday, and followed the direction of the sound through the thick underbrush. My boots caught on roots and low brambles, heart thudding harder than it should have. When I reached a small ravine, I saw him, a man, maybe in his 40s, slumped against a fallen log halfway down the slope. His leg was twisted unnaturally, jeans torn and dirty. A climbing rope hung from a branch above, cut clean through where it must have snapped. He looked up at me, eyes glassy from pain or shock. "Slipped," he muttered, voice barely there. "Can't move my leg." I wasn't trained for this, beyond the basic wilderness first aid videos I'd watched the week before the trip, but I knew enough to take a breath and think. He was conscious. That was good. No heavy bleeding. I moved closer, crouching beside him and introducing myself, though my voice trembled a little. His breathing was fast, shallow, classic shock. I remembered something about warmth and calm. I grabbed my sleeping bag from my pack and wrapped it around him, pressing my extra flannel under his head. I checked his pulse, fast but steady, and tried to straighten his leg, but he groaned in pain. No splinting gear, no proper bandage. I improvised with 2 sturdy sticks and my belt, binding them as gently as I could. He hissed between his teeth, but didn't protest. "Think you can drink some water?" I asked. He nodded, so I poured a little from my bottle into his cupped hands. He sipped slowly, wincing. The clouds overhead thickened, the smell of rain sharp in the air. We needed to move before it got dark, or worse, cold and wet. I looked up the slope. The fire road wasn't far, maybe a few hundred yards. If I could drag him up there, I could flag someone down, but the ground was steep, slick with leaves. I wasn't strong enough to carry him, not without making things worse. That's when I spotted the coil of his climbing rope. If I could use it to brace his leg and pull him gently on my sleeping pad, maybe I could haul him up. My pulse steadied a little as I started tying knots, just like I'd practiced at home on my porch rail, never imagining it might matter one day. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady. By the time I had the rope anchored to a tree, the drizzle had turned into a cold, steady rain that slicked every rock and root in sight. The man, he'd told me his name, was Eric, was shivering hard, his face pale and tight with pain. I kept talking to him, partly to reassure him, partly to keep myself from panicking. "We'll get you up there," I said, my voice barely audible over the rain. "One pull at a time." I slid my sleeping pad under him as gently as I could. It made a crude sled, but it was something. The rope looped through my belt and around a nearby trunk gave me leverage. I pulled. The pad shifted a few inches, leaves and mud sliding beneath it. He groaned but managed to nod when I asked if he was okay to keep going. The climb felt endless. Every few feet, I'd have to wedge a rock behind the pad so he wouldn't slip back while I caught my breath. My hands were shaking, partly from the cold, partly from the effort, but I kept at it. I thought about all the stories I'd read where people froze up in emergencies, how easy it would be to convince yourself help was coming, but there was no one else. Out here, help was me. At one point, the rope slipped through my fingers and burned the skin raw. I let out a wordless sound, more frustration than pain, and went back to it. Eric tried to lighten the moment with a grim smile. "Bet this wasn't on your camping itinerary," he said through clenched teeth. "Not unless they start including mountain rescue for beginners in the brochure," I shot back, and we both laughed, the kind that comes out of nerves and fear. When we finally reached the fire road, my arms were jelly. I eased him against a tree and checked the splint. The swelling had increased, and his lips were trembling with cold. The rain had turned into a mist, but the temperature was dropping fast. I dug through my pack, emergency blanket, half a granola bar, flashlight. Not much, but it had to do. I covered him with the silver blanket, then looked down the road. Nothing but grey forest and fog. I figured the nearest ranger station was about 4 miles the way I'd driven in. It might take me an hour and a half if I jogged, but leaving him alone didn't sit right. I thought of another trick, signal fire. I'd seen it in survival guides. The trees were damp, but the dead pine needles beneath the road's edge were dry enough to catch. I built a small mound, using my pocket knife to shave kindling, then sparked it with my lighter. Smoke rose thick and white against the darkening sky. "Somebody's bound to see that," I said. Eric nodded, eyes half closed. "You're doing great, kid," he murmured. I sat beside him, feeding the fire, counting the minutes, and listening for the sound of an engine or voices through the mist. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours. The rain finally let up, leaving behind a dripping silence broken only by the hiss of my small fire and the steady plink of water falling from the branches. My watch had fogged over, but judging by the dimming light, I figured we were edging toward evening. I kept glancing down the road, hoping for the sound of tyres or a shout, anything, but the forest gave nothing back. Eric's breathing had grown shallow again, his face grey and tight. I remembered the phrase from a survival video, "Keep them warm, keep them talking." So I kept him talking. "Where were you climbing?" I asked, crouching close to the fire to coax more heat from it. "Ridge west of here," he said after a moment. "Solo. Dumb idea. Rope snapped when I tried to rappel down that slope." He paused, grimacing. "Lucky you wandered by." "Lucky," I echoed, though it didn't feel much like luck. My own legs were shaking from cold and exhaustion. I checked his pulse again, still fast but weaker now. I gave him another sip of water, careful not to overdo it. The mist was thickening into a fog that rolled low and white over the ground. I could barely see more than 20 yards down the fire road. I had to make a decision. The fire was burning low, and I was almost out of dry wood. Staying here much longer would risk both of us getting chilled through. If no one came soon, we'd have to find another way. "I'm going to head down the road a little," I told him. "See if I can get a signal or find someone." He blinked up at me. "You got a phone?" I did, but it was buried in my pack, turned off to save battery, and even if I turned it on, I doubted I'd find a single bar out here. Still, it was worth a try. I moved a few yards down the road and held it up. Nothing, not even a flicker. When I came back, Eric was shivering hard, his teeth chattering. I tore open the last of my emergency hand warmers and tucked them inside the blanket near his chest. "That'll help a little," I said. He nodded faintly. "You sure you're okay?" "Yeah," I lied, even though my arms and legs felt like wet sand. I looked at the little fire, then at the darkening woods. My gut told me help wasn't close. I might have to go find it myself. But leaving him alone, injured in shock, with a weak fire, and no guarantee the rain wouldn't come back, was a gamble. I weighed the options in my head, staring at the road disappearing into fog. Then I heard it. Faint but real, the low rumble of an engine. My heart leapt. I grabbed my flashlight and ran toward the sound, waving the beam in wide arcs. "Hey, over here!" I shouted, voice cracking. The sound grew louder, closer, then stopped. Through the mist came the dim outline of a pickup truck with orange lights on top. Forest Service. I ran back to Eric, shouting, "They're here! Hang on, buddy!" For the first time all day, I saw his face soften with relief. The truck rolled up slowly through the fog, tyres crunching over gravel and wet leaves. 2 figures stepped out, both in forest green jackets, one carrying a radio, the other a first aid kit slung over his shoulder. Their faces were streaked with rain, but their expressions were steady, professional, the kind of calm that settles everything down. "What have we got?" one asked, crouching beside Eric. "Climbing accident," I said, trying to catch my breath. "His rope snapped, possible broken leg. He's been in shock, but he's alert." The man gave me a quick nod. "Good work keeping him warm," he said, already unwrapping bandages. "You splint that leg yourself?" I nodded. "With a belt and a couple of sticks." Smart thinking. Those words hit harder than I expected. Until that moment, I hadn't realised how close I'd been to falling apart. I stepped back to give them room while they worked. The other ranger keyed his radio, speaking into it in clipped, practiced tones, requesting an evac team and confirming their location. The sound of his voice, the clarity of his words, it was like a rope pulling me back to solid ground. I watched them check Eric's vitals, wrap his leg properly and cover him with a thicker insulated blanket. They spoke to him in calm voices, reassuring, confident. I felt the tension drain from my body, replaced by a deep, shaking exhaustion that went all the way to my bones. "You're the one who found him?" the first ranger asked. "Yeah," I said. "I heard him calling for help while I was camping nearby." He gave a low whistle. "Good timing. With this weather, another hour and he might have gone hypothermic." He looked at me, eyes narrowing slightly. "You hike alone often?" "First time," I admitted. He chuckled softly. "Well, you picked a memorable trip." The second ranger returned. "Rescue team's on the way. ETA 20 minutes. They'll take him out by stretcher to the main road." We all waited by the fire as the fog thickened again. Eric's colour slowly came back and he managed a weak grin. "You saved my hide, man," he said. "I just did what anyone would have done," I replied, though deep down I wasn't so sure. I knew how easily fear could have frozen me earlier, but something about that moment, the silence of the woods, the need to act, had pushed me past hesitation. When the rescue crew arrived, I helped them lift the stretcher and guide it down the slick road. Watching them load Eric into the back of the truck, I felt a strange mix of pride and humility. Before they left, the ranger clapped me on the shoulder. "You ever think about joining search and rescue? You've got the instincts," I smiled, shaking my head. "Maybe I'll stick to camping for now," he grinned. "That's how most of us start." The truck's lights disappeared into the fog, leaving me alone with the dying fire and the dripping trees. When the Forest Service truck disappeared down the winding road, the quiet settled back in like a heavy blanket. I stood there for a long while, listening to the drip of rain from the pines and the faint hiss of the fire as it sank into a bed of orange coals. My hands were trembling again, not from cold this time, but from the slow release of everything I'd been holding together. The adrenaline faded, and suddenly every muscle in my body felt twice its weight. I sat down on a log, staring at the little fire I'd built hours ago. The smoke rose straight now, no wind to twist it. The fog had thinned, and I could see the outline of my camp lantern back through the trees. It looked impossibly far away, even though it wasn't more than a quarter mile. For a while, I just breathed, long, deep breaths that felt like the first real ones I'd taken all day. My gloves were soaked, my jacket plastered to my shoulders, but I didn't care. Somewhere out there, a man was on his way to a hospital because I'd stumbled into the right place at the right time and decided not to walk the other way. That thought sat with me, warming me more than the fire. I eventually gathered my gear, slinging my pack onto my sore shoulders. Every step back to camp felt heavier, slower. By the time I reached the tent, the world was nearly dark. I got a small flame going again, boiled the last of my water for instant soup and sat there with the mug between my hands, watching steam curl into the night. The forest was alive again. The distant bark of a fox, a breeze through the needles, the pop of my firewood, all the familiar sounds that had seemed so ordinary when I first arrived now felt different, almost sacred. I realised how easily things can turn out differently in the wild. How quickly an adventure becomes an emergency, and how often the first person to act isn't a professional rescuer, but just someone nearby who decides to try. I thought of the ranger's words, "You've got the instincts." I wasn't sure about that. I hadn't felt brave or skilled. Mostly I'd felt scared. But maybe that's what courage really is, acting anyway, even when you don't feel ready. When I finally crawled into my sleeping bag, the night air was sharp but clean. My body ached, but my mind was still. I fell asleep to the soft rustle of the forest, thinking about how sometimes you go out looking for peace and quiet and end up finding something else entirely, something that stays with you long after the fire burns out. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the pines, painting everything gold. I packed up, checked the site one last time, and started down the trail toward home. The forest was the same, yet I wasn't. And as I walked, I found myself glancing now and then into the trees, listening, not just for danger, but for anyone who might call out for help again.